Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure. Welcome to the adventures of self. I'm your host, Taylor Roark, and this week is a special week because it is just me. I don't have a guest this week. I could introduce myself. Welcome, Taylor. Thank you, Taylor. It's a bit like going back to childhood when I just talked to myself, so it's a good regression. How did this come about? Well, first of all, this is episode 26, and I wanted to take some time to really celebrate what we've done in the first 25 episodes of this podcast. So there's a little bit of a look back, and certainly a looking forward to what we're going to be creating over the coming weeks, months, and hopefully years ahead. And in particular, what drew me to create this episode was listening to a couple of recent episodes, episode 23 with Jim Shupak and episode 24 with Ryan Nurse. And what's interesting about those episodes is they both feature guests that have dealt with depression. And they're both very open about their experiences with depression. And I found myself in those episodes talking about or recounting my own experiences with depression. And it really got me thinking over the last few weeks about putting something out specifically dealing with depression and how I've dealt with depression. I've really suffered or have suffered from depression over the course of my life many times in various ways. And I believe that I've sort of come out the other side, not that every day is perfect, but that I have worked on this, become aware of my tendency to become depressed or to identify with depression. And I think that's really what sort of stood out for me, is this identification with something. And I was thinking about how, I've done many things, I've tried many things, and I'm going to go through a number of the things that I think, may be helpful to you or to somebody who is dealing with depression. They're not a complete list, and some may serve you, some may not. First of all, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a therapist. This isn't meant to be therapeutic advice, medical advice. It's just my experience and recounting what I've done and what I've worked on over I was going to say years, but I think decades is more appropriate here. I really looked back at, remembering a number of incidents in my life that were triggered very depressive episodes, severe depression, suicidal thoughts, turning to substances, alcohol, recreational drugs, looking for lots of other things to to take away my pain, whether that was filling myself up with movies, books, pornography, comic books, food, alcohol, drugs, or looking for some excuse, the relationship with my mother or my father or the lack thereof that had triggered all these things. So what I want to do today is, as I say, walk through. I've got 10 steps or suggestions that if you're dealing with depression, if you're dealing with deep sadness, or somebody who is, these are 10 suggestions that may help. As I say, they're not a cure-all. They may or may not resonate with you or whomever else. And also use this as a way to celebrate some of the things that we've done here on the podcast. So thanks for your support, and let's get into it. So I was thinking about the first incident that really, really triggered depression for me. I wasn't particularly happy yeah, as a teenager, I mean, I kind of went through a lot of teen angst and rebelliousness, and that's okay. I mean, it, that's not really where this story starts. I think for me, when I graduated from college or university, um, I really didn't have very much direction in what it is that I wanted to do or create in my world, and it really left me feeling, I was whatever 20, 21 at the time, and feeling like, well, I should have this all figured out. And having done a 4-year degree, I don't really have any sense of what it is I want to do. So, I bumbled around through a few things and ended up, as many triggers for depressive episodes, in a very challenging breakup with somebody who just kind of ghosted me. Well, did ghost me, and it, it's easy at the time. I thought that that was the reason why I was depressed, but actually, when I started looking at this, it was as much about the other things that were incomplete in my life, including myself, or primarily myself. And the incident, the relationship, or the ghosting, the challenge of the relationship was a very convenient, very poignant, very powerful trigger for all that. And I really spiraled down very, very hard. When I went through my first real drinking bout, where, I mean, yeah, I basically went about a month where I didn't eat any food. I had a job, a delivery job actually, delivering pizzas, which was good use of a college degree. Um, and I would do that all day, and then at night I would like drink a bottle of vodka just to stop the pain. And that went on for about 3 or 4 weeks. I just got further and further into myself, um, and I knew that it wasn't right, but it felt like the way to stop whatever pain I was going through. And so, you know, the first the first step I took was actually asking for help, and I think that, for anybody who's dealing with depression, it's interesting. I mean, that was probably whatever, close to 30 years ago now for me, this incident. And although still is a stigma attached to depression, I think there's much less of one. And mental health, mental well-being is far more recognized as important for everyone, and that depression or sadness or challenges, mental challenges in life can affect everyone. It's not sort of thought of as some, disease that I don't know, kind of like is an affliction for people that aren't able to cope with life. I think a lot of us feel pressures from all sorts of things: family, career, and certainly the pandemic crisis over the last year or so has put a lot of pressure on people. So, the first thing I would say is to seek help, whether that is calling a friend, speaking to a family member, or seeking professional assistance, medical assistance, or psychotherapy, or whatever it is. For me, interestingly, or I mean, I actually went to my mother because I didn't know who else to speak to, um, and kind of, she was a social worker, and I went to see her at the hospital where she worked, and I knew that I needed help, and I guess in a way it felt like a challenge, but also I knew that that was an opportunity for me, and I broke down in tears, told her what I was going through, and she, to her credit, realized very quickly, maybe because I went to see her in her professional setting rather than at home, she realized that it was too much to get involved in, and so very quickly she called in another friend of hers who was a social worker to talk through what I was going through and talk through what options there were for me. And from that, I started seeing a psychotherapist who I saw for well over a year, and I really value and the experience I had, and I recognize that there are definitely times when people need outside professional assistance to deal with problems. I was at a very, very low point, which takes me on to the second thing that people can use for dealing with depression. and it's something I don't take lightly, but I do recognize, which is medication. So when I was dealing with depression, it was right around the time that a lot of antidepressant drugs were just first starting coming out, the Prozac, and all the sort of followers from that. So these were all the SSRIs, the serotonin, whatever SSRI stands for, but it's about boosting and creating serotonin back into the system, because in depression we tend to deplete serotonin, and the receptors don't rebuild serotonin. And it was quite early on in the days of Prozac, and I knew that I was in a very, very difficult place, and the therapist and the psychiatrist, the medical doctor who prescribed the medicine, spoke to me about side effects and challenges with it. And I chose to go on Prozac, which I was on for, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I recognize that it lifted a cloud. I remember, thinking at the time, like, as my daily life, I was going through, felt like there was just this, kind of maybe like an Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh kind of cloud that hovered around me, but, at my shoulders or around my chest. It was just so heavy that I never felt that I could get out of, that it would just, like, it encompassed me, and I could not see a way out. I was having conversations with the psychotherapist, but for me, there was no way to get out of that cloud. And what the medication did for me was what it felt like was it lifted that cloud. So I could still see it, feel it. It was kind of like it was above me, just hovering above my head. So I could still see the darkness. I could still see the challenges that I had in my life, but I wasn't in them 100%. I could, start to have some space to look at them from a different perspective, rather than being 100% identified with them. And in that respect, it was really very helpful. And I do remember there was a time, within the first few months, that I thought, well, maybe I'll just be on these for the rest of my life, and that's okay. And I know some people who are on antidepressant medication for years and years at a time, and that's everybody's personal experience and decision with his or her physician. What I found was that for me, after a period of time, I didn't really like how I felt on Prozac. I felt quite fuzzy. It challenged all sorts of things: appetite, sexual connection, and energy, sleep, and yeah, it got to, for me, to be a feeling that I did not want to have as a lifetime, condition, if I didn't have to. And the thing about SSRIs, or at least certainly then, and I think this is still true, is that it is extremely dangerous to just break them, to go off them. Some people feel, and I think this was a lot of the press that came out for them for years, was that people would feel better and then stop taking them, and it would crash somebody's emotional and physiological condition, and sort of, snap them, really, really crack. And obviously I didn't want that at that point. So I worked with doctors to slowly come off them. It took months, at least a month or two, as I recall, to start to bleed down the levels of whatever I was taking, to a point where, and I remember feeling like physically the withdrawal, as if it was the medicine was kind of coming out, like being like almost like sucked out of me, or like withdrawn from me. I could feel the physical effects from it. So you know, they everybody has to make their own decision. So I'm not here to tell anybody what's right or wrong. I certainly found it to be a stepping stone, to be an assistance for a time, for a period of time. But I'm very grateful that I didn't think that I needed them for the rest of my life or for long term, and that I got to a point. They certainly helped me get to a point where I could start to deal with things on my own. Um, the next thing I'd say that I guess I started to do, particularly at that time, right? It was in my early 20s, was look for answers outside, right? So that, I mean, this was kind of pre-internet, uh, but it was, reading book. So there are all sorts of self-help books that might tell you how you are or why you are what you are. And yeah, I kind of devoured them, trying to find answers, trying to have somebody, I was seeing a therapist, whatever, once a week or once every couple of weeks, and I wanted, more answers, quicker answers, or something. I really believe that, going out and looking for, um, not necessarily answers, but guides, and so that's one of the uh, um, suggestions I have, and what I've sort of discovered in myself over time is that there are a lot of self-help books and books about psychology and how the mind works and how depression works and all sorts of things, and they're useful, but from my experience, I would say they're useful as guides. So because everybody's an individual, and unless somebody knows you and has worked with you individually, whether in a therapeutic or counseling or medical capacity, they're talking about statistics, or they're talking about uh, sort of common experiences, but that's not necessarily you. And it was a useful to see how the people statistically are in relation to something, um, because it gives an idea, maybe a comfort of something, and as I say, a guide. But I would caution against thinking that a book's going to tell you who you are. And yeah, just recalling the episode I had a few weeks ago with Charles Collins, who wrote a book about the guide to mastery, or creating a masterpiece of your life. And he looks at it was episode 18 of the podcast, and he looked at and has gathered a real wealth of information about how mastery has worked over the centuries. So a master crafts person in whatever field, whether that's weaving, goldsmithing, I don't know, writing, medicine, um, for centuries, there were guilds and class and groups of individuals who determined whether somebody was a master in his or her craft or field. And somebody would have to submit all these uh, pieces of art or work, whatever, to be judged, accredited, by a set of peers. And what's interesting about what Charles gathered was the steps that go through to that start with apprenticing. And traditionally this would be done on a sort of consecutive, cumulative um, schedule or practice throughout one's life, right? So that fairly early on, sort of in one's teen years or early 20s, you would start apprenticing with somebody on a particular craft, and after some period of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, you would then go out and start practicing um, your craft. And in many fields, it was called being a journeyman. So you would actually journey around from community to community, practicing and learning from other masters and adding to your toolbox of skills. And then the third stage, you would go on to be a master, and you would present your masterpieces, and you were at the peak of your ability. And the final stage in this four-step process was mentoring. So, what are you going to share and give to the apprentices and the journeymen, journeywomen that are coming up behind you? And so it has this wonderful cyclical nature to it. And this is a guide, right? It's not to say, okay, well, at X point or on X date, you are going to become master or whatever it is. And so like he, Charles has written books about this and has created a whole understanding of and broken down in far more detail than I'm covering here, or even that we covered on the podcast. But it's fascinating discussion about what it means to create a masterpiece of your life, and it goes to this idea about what it is to have books. I'll also just say, it just reminds me that we had an episode. Episode 8, I think, with Adrian Lehman, who spoke about this exact practice from a practical perspective. He had an interesting life in marketing and design. Sorry, not marketing, but design of products. And eventually has now gone out over the last 10, 15 years to become a natural builder. So used natural materials and build fairly large structures in nature. And one of the things he talked about at the end of that episode was his desire to, now that he's working, he's kind of moving from mastery into mentoring. And so he just kind of naturally described that. So it's an interesting and useful sort of verification of what Charles was talking about. So reading books is great, but at some point, what are you going to do with all that? And I'll just say the last thing, because this first set of suggestions I have for dealing with depression are sort of the outside in. So outside in suggestions. So there's often an idea, certainly from my experience, that the outside world can solve me, or the outside world can give me something that I can't give myself. And I think that is a logical place to start, and it's not necessarily where everybody starts, but it's a logical place to start, because when you feel so empty inside yourself, you're looking for things outside of you. And so, seeking help, looking for medication, reading a book, and I think all are about looking to the outside world in some way to help give you guidance or cure you, or set you on the right path. And the last thing I'll just say really here in the outside in world, which starts to move into something else, but is around self-care, and it's a bit of a tricky one, because what I would say with self-care is it goes to say what you're eating, what you are drinking, and maybe how you're sleeping, but really how you're taking care of yourself. And I say it's outside in because often in the beginning we look for somebody else to tell us what to do. So we find diets that say eat this, don't eat spinach, eat broccoli, eat beans because they have protein, don't eat beans because they're hard for digestion, right? And there are all these things that we get bombarded with, and it is a useful way to deal with depression and health in general, but it's a large topic, and it starts to sort of blur the lines between outside in and inside out, because ultimately I don't think that somebody can tell you what exactly is right for you. People can give you suggestions, and I think certainly things like not smoking, or not drinking to excess, or maybe even not drinking at all, drinking water, and staying away from certain types of food, highly saturated, highly processed um, foods, is good general advice. But then, like, what a particular food, or how you interact with a particular food or type of food, or when you eat, how you eat, I think that is useful to get information from outside, but ultimately that starts to be how you determine what works best for you. And I can talk about this for a long time. I don't want to go into it too much, um, because well, it's a much bigger topic, and I've noticed that I've really experimented with this over the years. So I've been experimenting with food and how I intake food, what foods I take, for decades, really. When I first started becoming aware of intolerances to food, what I was eating, really thinking about what I was eating and putting into my body. And if you want more information from the podcast, I would highly recommend episode 2 of the podcast with my very good friend Nicole Ferreras. She is a general practitioner, medical doctor here in the UK. She's got over 30 years experience, and in particular, she has focused um, more and more on concepts of functional health, holistic health, and that's really getting to know the body as a whole functioning entity. It's a fascinating discussion that we go into, and we barely scratch the surface, but it really, really looks at a lot of these concepts, and also kind of built on what I was saying in terms of what it is about reading a book, right? It's really good to get information, but ultimately you're going to have to start to take that in to yourself and see what works and what doesn't work. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. And I want to pivot now away from outside in methods of dealing with depression. And yeah, this is well, the next suggestion I have is probably the most important, and it's also the simplest, and it also is the one that connects the outside world to the inside world, and that is breathing. We can't live without breathing, um, and it happens without us having to think about it. So it is a totally reflexive, unconscious act that our body, the intelligence of our body, does for us. So when we sleep, when we're busy doing anything, whether we're doing work or really exerting ourselves in physical activity, breathing is happening, and we don't have to think about it. And breath is what gives us life. If you think about a human being, when a person stops breathing, they die, or they start to die. I mean, I think you can not breathe for a few minutes, but eventually you're not getting oxygen to your brain and other organs, and they will die, and you will too. And that, of course, day is all coming for us. But breathing is it is like the simplest way to actually deal with sadness and depression. And I mean that because we can bring consciousness into breathing. It is as simple as being in, if you're in a depressive episode, if things are, you're in a struggle, whatever it is, and I know there can be many, many struggles, not to belittle, and it doesn't take away or solve the problem, but it does give space. And so if you imagine, taking a moment to take a breath and to really be with that breath. It said that you cannot think, be in your constant sort of monkey mind chatter, you can't be doing that thinking and be conscious of your breath at the same time. You can only be one or the other. And if you take a moment to really, truly be conscious of your breathing, it gives you a moment of space, a moment of perspective. And it goes to what I was saying at the beginning, which is the ability to not identify with depression. The experience I spoke about in the beginning for me, and other times when I've gone through depression, I really have felt that I was depressed. That I not only that I was depressed, but that I was depression. That that myself as identity equaled depression. And all of this, the suggestions and experiences that I speak about here today, are about not identifying with depression. So if you can get just one, whatever, gram or inch or micron of space between who you are and the depression that you feel, you will start to see that you are not depression. You don't equal depression. You may feel depressed. You may have depression. It may be something that you are experiencing, but fundamentally that is not you. And to me, breath is the easiest way and the most powerful way to do this. So there's one thing just to be aware of your breathing, just to stop and actually be aware of your breath, not trying to change it, not trying to do anything with it, but just to be aware of your breath. Now, there are also many breathing techniques. So there's deep breathing, where you're really, really taking oxygen in and taking time to exhale it. I was blessed, excuse me, I was blessed to have an opportunity, or found an opportunity, or created an opportunity around the time when I was really dealing with depression, or a couple of years after, that I found a school. I was taking Aikido. And the Aikido was interesting in and of itself, but what was more interesting for me was the breathing. The sensei, the master who was teaching, was from Japan, and had lived and had moved to the United States. And every now and then, once a month or something like that, he, at the end of a class or even a specific class, would be just about breathing. And it was revolutionary to me. I'd never thought about it. I'd never even, I just knew nothing about it. And he slowed down thought and awareness and brought all of my attention into breathing. And it is a practice that has stayed with me for close to 30 years. The ability to take in long, slow, deep breaths and to hold that for a brief period of time and then to exhale in a long, deep, slow fashion. And he actually had these wonderful like clappers, these like wooden sticks that he would sort of clap together. It would make this beautiful echo sound, and that would signal us. We would close our eyes, and he would clap this, and he would, sort of say, "Now breathe in," and just count, like, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, clap, and hold, 2, 3, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, clap. And this just calm would start to come over me, and I would go further and further into the connection with the breath. And there was always space. There's always space in that breathing. And so whenever I start to feel agitated, and it may take me a few minutes, it may take me a few hours, or maybe even a few weeks, when I stop to just breathe, it gives me space away from being identified with depression. So the other thing I'll offer here as a pivot for moving from the outside in is to interact with the real world. And this can be as simple as just observation. So, in the world we live in now, we're so inundated with um, media and sensation from computers, from our mobile phones, from television. It's just kind of incessant. And technology is a wonderful thing, but it is a neutral thing. And if we become a slave to it, then it's then it's not a very useful tool. And I'm probably going to sound a little bit like an old man here, but I don't really care, because I know that for me, this is a way to get space away from any identification with sadness, feelings, depression, anything like that, is to take time to interact, just observe the real world. I mean, a tree, a park. One thing that's actually wonderful, so nature in any guise, not to try to figure it out, not to overcome it in any way, but just to observe. Yesterday, I went out for a walk in the morning. It was a very blustery, very windy, stormy day here in London, and there's a Parkland walk, a disused railway that's been turned into a walk. Um, and I was walking along it, and I came to, it was kind of relatively protected most of the time, but I came to a bit of a clearing, and it's a little bit up on high, and there was a bench, and I sat down because I saw there were, in this clearing, the wind was really, really blowing very hard, and there was a big old oak tree that was, I don't know, sort of 30, 50 yards away, and it was blowing like crazy, and you could just see the leaves and the big branches, bending and blowing, and the trunk that just stayed as solid and as still as it could be, while all the branches and the leaves just raced and danced about. And I just sat and watched it for not that long, a few minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. And the ability to just sit and observe what nature does with what it's given. Here's all this turmoil and wind and power and energy thrown against it. And yeah, there's branches that kind of bend, and maybe one or two break in a hard storm, and the leaves flutter about. But at its core, that trunk stays solid, isn't going anywhere. And anytime that we can just take a few moments, maybe a minute, maybe an hour, whatever works for you, to really sit and observe what's happening in the natural world. And I think, there are a couple of episodes that come to mind from the podcast. If you'd like to go back and listen, the first one is episode 1, How to Live the Adventure of Self, with my very good friend and modern mystic Sohel Moshki. And we really get into not only what this podcast is about as a concept, but how you can live the adventure of self-discovery, the adventure of self-expression. You actually have to go out and live it. It doesn't happen to you. You choose to live that, which is where we are in this arc of suggestions, the pivot, moving from outside in, and just becoming aware of what it is that you would love for yourself, what is possible for you, exploring what is possible for you. And I had a really lovely discussion with a guy I met online, Angel Rebo, in episode 20. We talk about the language of the heart, how to speak and listen from the heart. And it was very interesting because he and I both have corporate backgrounds. He worked in international corporate sales for 15 years. I worked in law and large-scale renewable energy development for close to 20 years. So it was really lovely to have that experience, have that connection, and then yet choose to speak about and really explore what it means to be in that heart space, observing and interacting with the real world, the natural world. The not to say that the things we have aren't real, but yeah, if you want to get space and perspective on where you are, spend a moment or an afternoon or the rest of your life in the natural world. And connected to that is the ability to observe children. If you have kids, if you are an aunt or an uncle, or you have friends who have kids, or just go to a park and observe a child, or on the street. I went for a walk this morning, and this family, father with his young son and his younger daughter, were walking, and the young daughter was just flailing about, just being whatever she was, 5-year-old. And I just, she was across the street. I watched the three of them going as they were going into a shop, and she was just kind of flailing her arms about, making a bunch of funny moves and having a great time. And I just watched her for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and just found myself laughing, really appreciating that here's somebody who is just experiencing life, playing with life. So this is a pivot from, these are the pivoting ways to deal from outside in, but still interacting with the world around us. So I want to move on to ways that are more sort of inside out. So as we start to bring this in, and breath, as I say, is probably the best and easiest and most obvious example of we're bringing breath into our lungs. And what do we do with that when we exhale, when we give that out, right? So here are some suggestions that deal with the inside out ways of dealing with depression and sadness and struggle and angst, whatever it is that you may be going through or know somebody who is going through. So the first thing I'll offer is actually something I got from somebody else, which but I do recognize it and have probably more recently adapted this in my life, which is to create small goals. I do remember a number of years ago, I came across Tim Ferriss, and I signed up for his newsletter or something. And one of the things that I got as a bonus was 5 things to do in the morning. I mean, Tim's very good at sort of like having lists and putting numbers and 4-hour work week and 4-hour workout schedule and all these things. But he does break things down to very bite-sized portions, which I think work very well. Particularly, when I look at my own depression, I could barely think about getting out of bed, let alone figuring out what I was going to do with my life. And starting with small things and not only setting small goals, but acknowledging them when you accomplish them. That's probably the more important thing. And so I remember Tim how to, sort of the five most important things to set your world, to set your day on fire, to make every day an amazing day. And I don't know if I remember all of them, but the first one I love, which was, when you first wake up, number one, make your bed. And he would give these time frames. He said, 30 seconds, 30 seconds to 2 minutes. I mean, depending on whether you got sheets or whether you just have a duvet. Yeah, and I know that when I've been depressed, I just let things lay there, and I don't really feel like dealing with it. But it is a very important signal to your mind, to your heart, about where you are. And if you would take 30 seconds to just straighten out your duvet cover on your bed, fluff your pillows or whatever, and make your bed, not to be your mother, but it is an amazing start to what can be an amazing day. And so, set goals. Set goals to do small goals, because from that you can develop a practice to do many, many more things. Once you set a goal to do one thing, you will find, or certainly in my experience, if I set a goal to do something small, I'm more inclined to continue doing it. If I say like, oh, I'm going to go, I haven't been to the gym or I haven't worked out for a month, and I'm going to do an hour workout, that's a bad idea, certainly for me, because I'll do that one workout, and then the next day and the next day and the next day, I'll think, oh my God, I'm in pain, that wasn't very much fun, I'm not going to do that again, I'm just going to take a break. Whereas one of the other things that Tim speaks about, which is how I got into my own physical workout, was to do 3 minutes or 5 minutes of a workout in the morning. You're not going to necessarily build a lot of muscle or anything like that, but you're going to build a practice, and that is really, really valuable. So just anything to get the heart going, to loosen things up. I do some stretching, and then go on from there. So yeah, setting small goals. The next thing I will offer is, as a suggestion, is kind of goes on from what I was just saying, but to do something physical. So when we are doing something physical, we're raising our heart rate, and actually, bringing more oxygen in it, actually, and that increases dopamine, increases serotonin levels. And I know it can feel sometimes like doing something physical, feels like a world away. And I was really struck by this, by the conversation I had with Jim Shupak in episode 23, because he spoke about a depressive episode he went through for, I don't know, over 3 months, where he was, really, really clinically depressed, and could barely, move or deal with things. And what he spoke about was that the first thing he would do, I mean, things can come to you, and you just kind of have to be aware when the universe is nudging you in a particular way. And so I think he was staying with his, I don't know if he was, maybe he was on his own. I thought he was with his parents, but anyway, it doesn't matter. His dog would come to him, once or twice a day, and nudge him with his nose, because he needed to go out, needed to, do his business. And for Jim, that was the way to start moving. And what he found was that every afternoon, when the dog would come and nudge him, he would get up, get the dog's leash, and he would take the dog for a walk. And he found that just walking around the block once was something to get his body moving. And after a few days, he found himself, looking forward to the idea of going for a walk. And so would start going for a walk for 2 blocks or 3 blocks or something. And eventually, he became more interested in it, and started leaving the dog at home and going for a jog. So he went for a jog around a few blocks, and then grew from there. And he did his first 5-kilometer run, and then decided to run a marathon. which is an amazing accomplishment. So, you really see that from small beginnings, small goals, and choosing to do something, you develop a practice that can grow. And I've got some great episodes with people who do physical things and have I use them to overcome their own struggles, because we all have struggles. That's part of the human experience, and we're all dealing with things that challenge us. My friend Donna Fallows uses dance and movement and creativity and play. So episode 5 with Donna Fallows is a great resource for getting more into what's possible with movement. Another person who uses movement is Phil Halford. That's episode 14. And Phil was a professional dancer, and now he uses. I mean, he's a great, just transformational movement. His I love his Instagram feed, his movement. He uses it so creatively and so honestly, as a way to deal with whatever he's going through. And I really, just met Phil recently. Love him dearly. Really love what he's doing and showing is possible, because sometimes I think for many of us we think about here's a professional dancer and they're doing these amazing ballet moves and things that I can't do, so it's not accessible. And Phil really breaks things down into very human, the like basic primal movement about what we can do to move through things. And move through emotions and transform things. So I really recommend listening to his episode for more information on that. And also, the episode that comes to mind is episode 15 with Karen Dark. And Karen's an amazing inspiration, although she plays it down throughout her life and throughout the episode that I had with her. Karen had a debilitating accident in, I don't remember when, sometime in her early 20s, a rock climbing accident that left her paralyzed from the neck down. But so what? She went on she's done absolutely amazing things with who she is and where she is. So she cycled across Japan. She's climbed mountains. She won a silver medal at the Paralympic Games in cycling here in London, and then went on to win a gold medal for Paralympic cycling in Rio. And so talk about what is possible with movement and what it gives you. Please support Karen. She's got an amazing cause, Quest 79. Listen to the episode to find out more. And check her out. She's really an amazing inspiration, and I'm grateful for for having her on. So yeah, that's all kind of like doing something physical, whatever that is for you. And you can really start small and build. And I think sort of something along those lines. See, and for me, these are all like what we decide to do from inside, and we take that out into the world. So we have a small goal that we decide on, and then we act on it. We choose something physical, and then we actually follow through and we do that, and that takes us out of identification with depression and sadness. And maybe for some people we're not that physically inclined, and but we do like being sociable. And the last year has certainly challenged our ability to be sociable in person, but the explosion of Zoom as a resource and the ability to connect with people online is quite remarkable, and it's been really amazing to see the number of people who have been offering free resources to try new things. I mean, there's been a lot of that in health and fitness, but also in all sorts of other things. So the next thing I would offer is to try something new, especially something social, so that you're interacting with other human beings. And I just want to really highlight a few episodes that we've covered here on the show, of people that are always, you know, I'd say trying something new, but it's really about expressing yourself. Yeah, because however that is for you. Now, the things that I can think of that come to me in terms of expressing myself are writing, painting, and dancing. And I kind of put these sort of like in this category of being inside out, because whether I choose to dance or write or paint is a personal expression, and it's what is going to suit me. I actually never looked at or thought about painting, and somebody I was dating last year was adamant would paint quite often, and so I started doing watercolor that I just assumed I could never do, and I just decided to do it. And so whatever it is, that there is an expression of your truth that you can start to experiment with. It doesn't have to be seen by anybody. It doesn't have to go on social media. It can just be for you. So I use writing. Some writing I share and put up online for work or for personal matter, and some things I write absolutely for myself, and I have zero interest in ever showing them to anybody. But it's a way about moving from inside out, about expressing things, about expressing emotions or things I'm going through, as a way to deal with anger, sadness, depression, frustration, whatever. And Donna speaks about in episode, or was it 5 with Donna Fallows, speaks about painting as well. In fact, we look at, I guess you have to watch the YouTube video version to see the paintings that Donna has used in her practice with Tamalpa, which is a fascinating movement art therapy that we talk about. But there, a few other options that really, or episodes that really come to mind. My friend Kirsty Carr, who has who works with comedy, and so she has brought comedy into the transformational space, and talks about her experience and the fears that she went through in terms of coming to terms with actually expressing herself and going on stage and performing. And now she's doing amazing things with that. And so it's really interesting to have a conversation with her. It was one of the first episodes we had, episode 6, where she was just starting to connect with and move past her fear to be in this self-expressed space. And for her, it's comedy, personal development, and transformational comedy. And it's pretty raunchy, pretty hard-hitting comedy, very funny, and very beautiful. And it just goes to how each person has to determine what is right for him or her. Akello Stone, who I spoke to recently on episode 21. I mean, he's quite an amazing guy. He's a sociology professor who has been in acting and in producing his own movies, and not really for anything or for anybody, not for the fame, just because it's an expression of himself, and doing puppetry. We spend a good period of that episode talking about puppetry, because it's something that he chose to experiment with, and liked it, and found a medium, a way of expressing himself. What's interesting as well, I'm just remembering, is that one of the things that Akello spoke about was something like knitting or crochet or something, that somebody had said, "Oh, you got to try this," and he tried it, realized he absolutely hated it, and so that's okay, right? The point is to actually try things and decide what it is that you like or don't like. I didn't think I'd like painting because I didn't think I was very good at it, or I didn't think I was good at it at all. And I tried it, and I really enjoyed it. So now I paint more now. I'm not interested in being in a gallery or anything like that. I just do it for me. And last week's episode with Alice Mabin, who, I mean, we barely get into it on the episode because Alice has had an amazing life. I really encourage you to check out the episode 25, and go to her website. I think it's Al Mabin, and look at her photography, look at the videos that she produces, get her book that tells her story of everything that she's gone through. I mean, she raised sheepdogs, she's traveled the world, she's become an amazing rural photographer. When people said you will never succeed in this, and it just goes to what it is that we choose, or you choose to express for yourself. So I just want to sort of recap the sort of 8 or 9 suggestions I have for how to deal with depression, for yourself, and for anybody else in your life. So first of all, in these kind of outside in, where we're looking for something outside of us to help us, to seek help. Go speak to somebody, professional or personal, about what you're going through. Secondly, you may need medication, and I hope for you that would only be a stepping stone, but everybody has to deal with that on their own. Third thing, read a book, and the interesting thing about reading a book. I was sort of talking about the books that sort of tell you what to do, but the more interesting books that I find as I go are, as I say, they're guides, they're guideposts. So I would say, I'm just looking across me, and there's a book on the spiritual teachings of the Tao, and Taoism. The Tao Te Ching is probably the best book that I continually go back to again and again and again. I think it's the second most published book in the world, second only to the Bible. I mean, it's very, very thin, and I go through it and randomly go to it time and time again. Stephen Mitchell's translation and illustrated version is an excellent hard copy. I usually keep 2 or 3 and give them out to people as presents all the time, because I think it's one of the best resources in my life. And it goes to, there can be value in getting kind of the factual, specific type of books, but really the books that start to get you to explore your own self, that don't tell you what to do, but that inspire you, that engage you, that entertain you to go on your own adventure of self-discovery. So number 4 in our list was self-care. So that's around eating, drinking, and sleeping. We didn't really talk much about sleep, but yeah, sleep is really, really important. The value of I saw, maybe you've probably heard this, but I saw the value in like shutting your phone off, and for at least an hour before you go to bed. Will help your sleep pattern immensely, like more than you can imagine. And it also goes to, I know a lot of people, when people read books, they read them on whatever, the Kindle or iPad. I mean, Kindle has less problems with eyes, but I just love, maybe I'm a little old school, I love a hard book, and the ability to turn off for some period of time, turn off the devices. I think that goes really into self-care as well. So the pivot we spoke about, kind of going from outside in, is first of all to breathe, and secondly, this was number 6, to interact with the real world, to the natural world, whether that's by going for a walk, going for a hike, sitting in a park, observing what those of us who are less affected by our mental chatter, whether that's a bird, a blade of grass, or a child. So number 7 was to set small goals. When we set small goals, we create a opportunity for small wins. And when we set small goals and we accomplish them, if you accomplish them, celebrate it. Really acknowledge what it is that you've accomplished, even if all you've done is gotten out of bed and made the bed. that is an accomplishment for the day. Seriously. Um, Number 8 was sort of a combination of doing something physical and trying something new, especially social activities. It just gets us out of our own mind, and I spoke about it with Ryan Nurse in episode 24, the tyranny of our minds. So when we're doing something physical, when we're interacting with others, we have less time to really be sort of lost and focused on everything that we're thinking about. Number 9 was to do something to express yourself. So whether that's writing, painting, comedy, puppetry, crochet, cooking, photography, there's a million different things that you can try. And you know, to say there's a lot of free resources out there, but it is not only just about observing and getting the information, but actually doing it, but being in the expression of it. That's where you really start to learn. And I just want to finish with one last suggestion, and you know, maybe it's a bit more advanced in a way, but it's like the breathing. It's the most impactful, I wouldn't say important, but the most impactful opportunity to deal with depression, anger, frustration, anything that is taking you over. And the last thing I would suggest is to go within, to take time to be with yourself, not to identify with your sadness, anger, or whatever it is, but to reflect on your true nature. So this can happen through meditation, but I know a lot of people really struggle with meditation. There's a lot of guided meditations. There are classes. It is a way to start to recognize your true nature, um, your true nature as consciousness, and what's possible with that. So I think connected to this are some meditative, maybe physical practices, things like Tai Chi, Qigong. I think there are a lot of others. Yoga can be like this, although I think a lot of modern yoga, in my experience, gets into more sort of the physical realm, but certainly the traditional yoga and some yogic practices, yin yoga in particular, allow for you know, connection to the inside world, the inner space that fills our consciousness, and that when we tap into is the source of all of our creative potential. And I think coupled with this, I just want to reiterate the opportunity and the power of breath. When we think of the words, you know, to respire, respiration, I think some of you know, kind of geek out on words, the spire part is the same root in Latin as spirit. It is literally the spirit that fills us, and it is what gives us life. And it's all a mystery. All of this is a mystery. I don't say any of this to say that I know what this existence is or what's right for you. These are just suggestions and opportunities from my own experience. Yeah. When in doubt, just stop and breathe. Once, twice, thrice. 3 breaths can change your world. So I want to thank all of you for taking time to listen today. And we'll be back next week with a new guest, a new adventure, and yeah, thanks for listening.